10 Advaita Stories and Proverbs.
On the self and reality.
The ocean and the wave. A wave arose in the vast ocean, dancing upon the surface. It looked around and saw other waves, some large, some small, some gentle, some fierce. The wave became proud when it grew tall and fearful when it began to recede. One day, a wise wave approached and said, "Why are you troubled?" The first wave replied, "I fear disappearing. I see waves rise and fall, and I know my time will come." The wise wave laughed and said, "You are not just a wave, you are the ocean itself. The form may change, but the water remains." Hearing this, the wave turned inward and realized, "I have always been the ocean. The rise and fall were mere appearances." With this knowledge, it was free from all fear. Lesson: the self, Atman, is like the ocean, and the individual, Jiva, is like the wave. We mistakenly identify with the form, forgetting that we are the infinite reality, Brahman. When we see through this illusion, all fear and suffering vanish, leaving only peace. You are not the body. You are the awareness that knows the body. The world appears, but you are beyond appearance. The self is ever present. Only the mind veils it. There is no seeker and no path, only that which is. The ocean does not fear the waves. The self is untouched by thoughts. The dream and the waking. A man dreams of being a king, ruling a vast kingdom. Upon waking, he sees it was all in his mind. Likewise, the waking world itself is just another dream within consciousness. Lesson: the world is unreal, like a dream. Only the awareness that witnesses it is real. You are the sky. Thoughts are just passing clouds. What comes and goes is not you. The real is never absent. Only the unreal appears and disappears. There is no other. All is the self. In deep sleep, you are free. The same is true in waking, but unnoticed.
On illusion, Maya, and the mind.
The dream and the awakening. A man fell into a deep sleep and dreamt that he was a beggar, wandering the streets, hungry and lost. In his dream, he suffered greatly. People ignored him, doors remained closed, and no one showed him kindness. Then, suddenly, he woke up. To his surprise, he was not a beggar at all. He was a wealthy man, resting in his own home. The entire experience of suffering had been nothing more than a dream. A sage who was present said, "Just as your dream vanished upon waking, so too will this waking world disappear when you awaken to the truth." The mind creates illusions, weaving the fabric of Maya, but reality remains untouched. You were never the beggar. You were always the self. Lesson: the world we perceive, with all its joys and sorrows, is like a dream. The mind creates the illusion of separateness and suffering. True awakening is realizing that the self is beyond the dream. It was never bound, never lacking, and never separate from the one reality. The snake in the rope is only an illusion. So too is the world in the self. The moon in the lake is just a reflection. The mind sees only reflections, not reality. The dream vanishes upon waking. The world vanishes upon realization. Mind creates bondage. Mind creates liberation. The mind is nothing but ripples in the ocean of consciousness. The rope and the snake. A man walks in the twilight and sees a snake on the path. Terrified, he runs away. The next morning, he returns and realizes it was just a rope. The snake never existed. Only his mind projected it. Lesson: the world is like the snake, an illusion, Maya. Only the rope, representing the self, Brahman, is real. Do not fight the mind, simply see it for what it is. Ignorance is believing in the reality of the unreal. The ego is a shadow. It has no substance of its own. The mind projects names and forms. The self remains unchanged. What you are looking for is the one who is looking.
On silence and stillness.
The lake and the moon. A traveler came to a beautiful lake one evening, watching the full moon reflected on its surface. The water was calm and clear, allowing the moon's light to shine without distortion. The traveler marveled at the beauty and asked a wise man nearby, "Why does the moon seem so perfect here?" The sage replied, "The moon is always there, but its reflection only appears when the water is still. If the water were turbulent, the moon would be lost in the ripples." The traveler, confused, asked, "What does this mean?" The sage smiled and said, "The moon is like the self, ever present and undisturbed. The mind is like the water. When it is turbulent with thoughts and desires, you cannot see your true nature. But when the mind becomes still, the reflection of the self shines clearly, effortlessly. Silence and stillness reveal the truth." Lesson: silence and stillness are not things we create. They are the natural state of the mind when it is free from the disturbances of thoughts. In that stillness, the true self is reflected, just as the moon is reflected on a calm lake. In silence, the truth speaks the loudest. Be still, and the illusion dissolves. The wind cannot shake the mountain. Thoughts cannot shake the self. Silence is not emptiness. It is full of presence. Where there is no thought, there is peace. The river makes noise. The ocean remains silent. Stop searching, and you will find what never left. The truest teaching is beyond words. Be still like a mirror, and truth will reflect itself. Nothing is missing. Only noise makes it seem so.
On liberation, moksha.
The caged bird and liberation. A bird was born in a golden cage. It was well fed and cared for, but it had never known the open sky. Over time, it forgot that it was meant to fly. One day, a wise sage walked by and saw the bird trapped inside. He said, "Dear one, you are not meant to live in confinement. Open your wings and be free." The bird hesitated. It had heard of freedom but feared the unknown. The cage felt safe, familiar. But something deep inside stirred, a forgotten memory of limitless skies. Summoning courage, the bird stepped out. At first, it flapped awkwardly, unsure, but as it let go of its fear, it soared effortlessly into the vast expanse. The sky had always been its home. It had simply forgotten. Lesson: liberation, moksha, is not something to be attained. It is our natural state. We only need to recognize the illusion of bondage and let go of false identification. Like the bird, once we realize we were never truly confined, we become free. Freedom is not in the future. It is always now. Liberation is not something to attain. It is your true nature. You are not bound. You only think you are. Realization is recognizing what you have always been. When you stop identifying with the unreal, only freedom remains. The lion and the sheep. A lion cub grows up among sheep, believing itself to be one. One day, an older lion shows it its reflection in the water. The cub roars in realization. It was always a lion. Lesson: you are not the limited person you think you are. You are Brahman itself. The liberated one is not someone different. It is simply you without illusion. No one is enlightened, for there is no separate self to be enlightened. Moksha is not a destination. It is the disappearance of the traveler. He who seeks freedom must first see that he was never bound. The key to liberation is already in your hand.
On knowledge and ignorance.
The sun and the shadow. A traveler walked through a dense forest, lost and confused. The thick canopy blocked the sunlight, and he stumbled over roots and rocks, unable to see clearly. He grew frustrated, blaming the path for his suffering. At last, he reached an open clearing where the sun shone brightly. The moment the light touched his eyes, the confusion vanished. He could now see everything clearly. The same path that seemed dangerous before was now simple to walk. The traveler laughed. "Nothing outside has changed. Only my vision has cleared." Lesson: ignorance, avidya, is like the darkness of the forest, making us believe in bondage, suffering, and separation. Knowledge, jnana, is like the sun. It does not change the world, but reveals the truth that was always there. Once we see clearly, all confusion disappears. The ignorant man searches. The wise one abides. To know the self, you must unlearn the world. The world is only a story the mind tells itself. Knowledge of the unreal is ignorance. Knowledge of the real is wisdom. True knowledge is knowing that you are beyond knowledge. The sun and the reflection. A puddle reflects the sun. When the puddle dries, the reflection disappears, but the real sun remains untouched. Lesson: the body and mind are like reflections, but the self is untouched by their changes. Words can point the way, but they are not the way. The wise see through illusion. The ignorant worship it. Nothing can give you what you already are. The only veil over truth is the idea that there is a veil. The knower of Brahman becomes Brahman.
On non-duality, Advaita.
The clay and the pots. Once, a potter made many pots of different shapes and sizes. Some were large, some small, some beautifully decorated, while others were plain. The people in the village admired the differences and argued over which pot was the best. One day, a wise man visited the potter's workshop and said, "You are all so focused on the shape, but have you looked at what they are made of?" He picked up a pot and smashed it. "The form is gone," he said, "but what remains?" "Clay," the villagers replied. The wise man smiled. "Just as all these pots are nothing but clay in different forms, all names and shapes in this world are nothing but Brahman. Appearances change, but the essence remains the same." Lesson: non-duality, Advaita, teaches that all distinctions, big and small, beautiful and ugly, self and other, are mere appearances. The underlying reality is one, like the clay behind all pots. There is no two. There is only one, without a second. The wave and the ocean are not separate. No inside, no outside, only the self. The drop does not merge with the ocean. It realizes it was never separate. There is no other. There is only this. The salt and the ocean. A disciple asks his guru, "What is the self?" The guru dissolves salt in water and asks him to find it. The disciple cannot separate the salt, but he can taste it everywhere. Lesson: the self pervades everything, though it cannot be seen separately. The sky and the pot. A clay pot contains space inside it. When the pot breaks, the space is not destroyed. It merges with the infinite sky. Lesson: the self is not limited by the body. When the body perishes, the self remains as infinite consciousness. Duality is only a misunderstanding of what is one. The river and its banks are only one reality appearing as two. Nothing exists apart from the self. There is no difference between the seer, the seen, and the seeing. The world is a play of shadows. The light is one.
On detachment and surrender.
The river and the ocean. A small river flowed restlessly, winding through valleys, forests, and villages. Along its journey, it clung to its identity, fearing what lay ahead. One day, it reached the vast ocean. Seeing the infinite expanse before it, the river hesitated. "If I enter the ocean, I will lose myself," it cried. A gentle breeze whispered, "You are not losing yourself. You are becoming what you always were." The river is never separate from the ocean. It only believes it is. Hearing this, the river surrendered and merged into the ocean, realizing that it had never been apart. It was always water, whether as a river or as the boundless sea. Lesson: detachment and surrender in Advaita do not mean loss, but the recognition that the individual self, Jiva, was never separate from the infinite, Brahman. When we let go of our false identity, we merge effortlessly into the truth of our being. Let go of the dream, and you will wake up. Attachment is suffering. Non-attachment is peace. The world is a passing show. Do not get caught in it. Be as free as the wind, unbound by name and form. When nothing belongs to you, everything is yours. The leaf and the wind. A leaf clung tightly to the branch of a great tree, fearing the day it would fall. It had seen other leaves carried away by the wind and thought, "Once I let go, I will be lost forever." One day, a gentle breeze whispered, "Why do you hold on so tightly?" The leaf replied, "I am afraid. I do not know where the wind will take me." The wind laughed softly. "You are not separate from me. I have carried every leaf, every seed, and every breath of life. Let go, and you will see." With trust, the leaf released its grip. Instead of falling into oblivion, it was lifted gracefully by the wind, carried across the sky, touching rivers, mountains, and open fields. It finally landed on the earth, where it became one with the soil, nourishing the tree it once clung to. Lesson: true surrender is not about losing oneself. It is about realizing that we were never separate. Like the leaf trusting the wind, when we let go of our attachments, we are carried effortlessly by the flow of existence, which has always been taking care of us. Hold on to nothing, and you will have everything. The wise one watches the play, but does not become the character. Surrender is not weakness, it is freedom. Clinging creates suffering. Letting go reveals peace. Nothing is truly lost, for nothing was ever owned.
On love and compassion.
The sun and its light. A disciple once asked his guru, "What is true love and compassion?" The guru pointed to the morning sun and said, "Look at the sun. It shines equally on all, on the rich and the poor. the saint and the sinner, the lotus and the mud. It asks for nothing in return. The disciple watched as the sunlight touched everything without discrimination. The Guru continued, "Love, in its highest form, is like the sun. It does not belong to anyone, nor is it directed at one and withheld from another. It simply shines." "But how can I love like that?" the disciple asked. The Guru smiled, "By realizing that you are not separate from anyone. When you know that all is one, love flows naturally, just as light flows from the sun." Lesson: in Advaita, true love and compassion arise from the understanding that there is no other. All beings are expressions of the same oneself. When this is known, love ceases to be personal and becomes as effortless as sunlight. In seeing the self, you see all beings as yourself. Love is the recognition of oneness. The realized one sees no enemy, for all is the self. Compassion arises when the illusion of separateness fades. To love another is to love yourself. The heart knows unity. The mind imagines division. Where there is no other, love is complete. Love is not something to be attained. It is what you are. The highest love is beyond all conditions. Self-knowledge is the source of all love.
On everyday life and practice.
The mirror and the dust. A disciple once asked his guru, "How can I practice Advaita in daily life? The world constantly pulls me into distractions, and I forget my true nature." The guru handed him a mirror covered in dust and said, "Look at this mirror. Can you see your reflection clearly?" "No," the disciple replied. The guru wiped the dust away and asked, "And now?" "Now I can see myself perfectly." The guru smiled. "Your true self is always present, like the reflection in the mirror. But the dust of worldly distractions, desires, fears, and identifications covers it. Your practice is not to create the self, but to remove what obscures it. Live with awareness, let go of attachments, and your true nature will shine effortlessly in everyday life." Lesson: Advaita is not about withdrawing from life, but seeing clearly through it. Every moment is an opportunity to wipe away the dust, to let go of illusions and rest in the awareness of what you already are. The marketplace and the monastery are the same for one who knows. Chop wood, carry water, whether before or after enlightenment. The world may change, but the self remains unchanged. Do not seek extraordinary experiences. Truth is found in the ordinary. Simplicity is the highest wisdom. The path is not separate from life itself. Meditation is not an act. It is simply being. Every moment is an invitation to wake up. The greatest practice is to see no separation. Truth is not hidden. It is just overlooked.
On death and eternity.
The traveler and the inn. A weary traveler arrived at an inn after a long journey. He ate, rested, and spent the night there. In the morning, he packed his belongings and prepared to leave. The innkeeper asked, "Why are you leaving?" "Stay a little longer." The traveler smiled and said, "This inn is not my home. I only stopped here for a while. My journey must continue." The innkeeper nodded, understanding the truth of his words. A wise sage witnessing this turned to his disciple and said, "The body is like this inn. The self is the traveler. It stays for a while, but it does not belong here. When the time comes, it simply moves on, untouched and unchanged." Lesson: Death is not the end, for the self was never born and never dies. The body is just a temporary resting place. The eternal awareness that we truly are remains beyond birth and death, just as the traveler exists before and after his stay at the inn. That which is born will die, but you were never born. Death is only a door to what has always been. The body may perish, but you are not the body. You were never born, and you will never die. The self is beyond birth, beyond death, beyond time. The wave and the ocean. A wave rises and falls, thinking it is separate from the ocean. It fears its disappearance, but upon dissolving, it realizes it was never apart from the ocean. Lesson: the individual self, jiva, fears death, but it is always one with the infinite Brahman. The fear of death belongs only to the body, not to you. There is no beginning, no end, only eternal being. When the wave falls, it is still the ocean. Death is not an event, it is just the end of an illusion. The self remains, untouched by the coming and going of forms.
Where there are 10 stories about Advaita, there is an 11th one.
The musk deer. A musk deer smells a divine fragrance and searches for its source everywhere, unaware that the fragrance comes from its own navel. Lesson: we seek happiness outside, but true peace is found within.
Where there are 11 stories about Advaita, there is also an 11th and a half one.
The gold and the ornaments. A jeweler melts different ornaments, rings, bangles, necklaces, back into gold. Though their forms changed, the gold remained the same. Lesson: forms and identities change, but the essence, Brahman, is always the same.